this is fantastic. This is GT racing right now.
He's got traction, he's got everything outside of both of them! Maloney!
Oh, he's taking Anderson! Anderson's up top!
Oh my god! Oh. Big crash! Oh my goodness, half the field's gonna get rolled!
It's very close. These guys are one to make their way through the field very quickly. Oh, here we go! Oh no! That's massive! This is it! This is over! I can't believe this! Oh my god!
God, what?
In a season with a little bit of everything. We've had moments of shock, such as Justin Rouget getting spun out of the lead in the dying stages at Oran Park. We've had moments of insanity, like the dying moments at Donington, and we've had our fair share of victors across the last 11 weeks of the 2021 Virtual Racing School GT Sprint Series. But all good things must come to an end, but not without one final hurrah. Tonight is the 12th and final round of the season as we head across to the land of the rising sun. It's the tricky, twisty, and demanding Suzuka Grand Prix circuit, which has seen its fair share of title deciders over the years. Who will run away with the spoils tonight? I'm Bo Albert, and alongside me for tonight's broadcast is the ever-talented Southpaw racer Reese Gardner, and sitting in the director's chair we have Mr. J.K. Kennedy as we bring you the action live here on Sim Speed TV. Reese, Suzuka is a highly demanding circuit in the best of cars, but in GT3 machinery, being precise and getting your racing lines nailed here is absolutely critical.
Absolutely is. You flatter me, Bo. Thanks for having me on board. Hello, everyone. Hope you enjoy the show tonight. Yeah, Suzuka, it is a place that is essentially endless corners in the first sector, and a hairpin and a chicane that might provide some overtaking opportunity, but with the momentum that you have to carry through these corners and the way aero wash affects the cars around these quick corners, it's going to be difficult to make a pass here tonight.
It is definitely going to be difficult to make a pass, but we know drivers are going to be brave to at least try something. But of course, life is always made easier if you start from the very front of the grid in qualifying, just getting underway at the moment now. Of course, drivers getting 2 laps in just 8 minutes to set a time, and we're seeing another little wide variety of cars that are going to take on the Suzuka Grand Prix circuit. And while we get them on their outlaps, why don't we see where exactly good old Suzuka is located? You can see just below Nagoya and above Osaka in the beautiful land of the rising sun, Japan. And it's a historic track. It has seen so much over the years, from obviously the legacies of Ayrton Senna versus Alain Prost in particular in the Grand Prix days. Opened in 1962 and weighing in at 5.8 kilometers. You can see the opening section is absolutely bonkers. And Reese, you get the first part of that lap wrong, it's going to cost you for a long time.
Absolutely. Even if you get the entry to turn 3 wrong, that affects your line all the way through the S's. And the Degner complex of 8 and 9 is going to be difficult as well. There's heavy curbs on the insides of those corners. You can very easily unsettle your car. It makes sense, though, because Suzuka was built by Honda as a test track. So it's definitely got a wide variety of corners to test the drivers.
It does indeed, and test them it will. So many times at Suzuka, we have seen, drivers making little mistakes all by themselves, in particular at the Degner corners and the absolutely fearsome 130R corner, where drivers in this particular race, due to the time we're going to be racing at, it's actually going to be 6:30 in the morning come race start. They're going to be blinded by the sun, and that's why I'm emphasizing Land of the Rising Sun so much, because quite literally the drivers are going to be running into the rising sun.
Yeah, of course. Yes, indeed. We've got an onboard shot here just coming through Degner, and once he comes around to 130R, you'll be able to see just how difficult it is for the drivers to line up their sight coming into this corner. But looks like a reasonable outlap here at the moment. The exit of the hairpin obviously widens, so that's a bit of an opportunity to get up the inside of your rival if they run a bit too wide on the exit. And the run here up to Spoon as well is going to be extremely difficult. Spoon is, I think, the most difficult corner on the circuit. Fast entry, you're back on the throttle and then back on the brakes again, and you have to bring it in tight for the second apex, but it's very easy for the front end to get away from you, and you might just run a bit too far over that curve and get the off-track 1X. Here we go then, as we ride on board with Maxime Detilly and the McLaren. Hello, rising sun. Check that out, and it's only going to get worse as the sun goes up.
Absolutely, and if there's any corner you want your visibility to be absolutely spot on, it's 130R. So iRacing have been short. Nope, no visibility for you. Just guess where the corner is going to be. You can see drivers on their first hot laps at the moment. And why don't we check out David Greisner at the moment in the McLaren? Of course, this car has been so dominant across the season. We have seen plenty of them take victories. You know, the likes of Belle Isle, we saw them, or we expected them to dominate at Road America because one of their big strengths was the straight line speed, and just how brutal they are out of the corner really is a tough match for any other GT3 to match. But the only car that has really been able to go toe-to-toe with the McLaren is the Audi, and as expected, we are seeing a lot of McLarens and Audis here tonight. But David makes his way through Spoon, negotiates very, very well, will make the run down the back straight towards 130i. You can see on board at the moment, and this is a fast corner. We'll try and get an idea of what his apex speed there, and it's some 230 kilometers an hour through there, so not for the faint-hearted, Reese.
No, certainly not, especially in these GT3 cars where you have to lift in order to take the corner. It's flat out in the headline-making Formula 1 cars that race around here, but in this kind of machinery, you have to back off a little as Greisner sets a 158.247, puts him on provisional pole. Looks pretty quick, if I do say so myself.
Yep, a very quick lap time indeed, but there are some experienced campaigners in this race. One of them is Maxime Detilly, and if anyone knows Maxime Detilly, you will know he is a McLaren veteran. He lives and breathes this car. If the BOP on this car does not favor it, and it's the slowest of the bunch, you'll still find Maxime running this car. So he knows what to do to get a McLaren around this circuit. And as Louis Nasha for Urano Esports goes to provisional pole position by a fairly decent margin of some 0.4 of a second at the moment. So a great lap there. What can Detilly do to knock them off the top spot? Under brakes into the final chicane. Get Apex 1 right. Open up Apex 2 and get on the loud pedal. Run yourself all the way through that final corner to the start-finish line. It's a 157.8 to beat Detilly. It's a little off the mark on the first lap, but thankfully, 2 laps, 1 more chance.
Indeed, they each get 2 laps here, and Detilly is going to have time to complete that second lap. One of the Ferraris here, Minayuki Kitagawa, going through 130R in the Epson Ferrari, using a little bit less of the curb on the exit than I expected, but it'll be interesting to see what he can do here. Doesn't quite widen up the exit of the chicane, and it looks like he has abandoned that one, and with no lap time set so far, he's not going to have time to go out there and get another lap on the board.
No, not at all. So it's going to be a very far back start of the grid there for Miyuki there. So not the best of cases at a track that we're hearing from some drivers may be a little tricky to pass. And qualifying may be very crucial as Darren Schoon decides to get that BMW M8 all the way up to 19th place. Mario Vlasic, of course, a driver very familiar from the V8 circles for a while, but of course, plenty of experience in GT machinery as well. Chosen the Audi for this one. Where can he stop the clock? He stops it at a 58.7 at the moment, so good enough for P6, just behind Simon Nicholson and Ross Rizzo. 2 very familiar names as Louis Nasha there comes across the line and just delivers a final blow for anyone willing to try and take pole position. He takes another 10th off his time race.
He does indeed. Very good time there from Louis Nasha. Matthew Keane, though, currently sitting in 24th position. 2-minute .557 is the time that he is currently on. Is that going to be an improvement? No, unfortunately. He runs just a slight bit slower, so that second lap not working for him. But Detilly is coming up to the end of his lap, just through 130R now. Will he be able to get those 4 or 5 tenths that he needs to pip Louis Nasha and David Greisner to pole position, sticking very hard to drivers right to shorten the run to the start-finish line, 58.393, so that second lap was again slower.
Yep, it was slower indeed, so the drivers not getting the pace they need out of their second laps. Maverick Benson crosses line at a 59.7, does not improve his position, so he'll have to stay put at the moment. Darren Tune in the BMW makes his run down the back straight towards 130R, and you can see the sky getting ever brighter at the moment, as all but one car at the moment have set a qualifying time, so 27 cars for tonight's race, so we'll have plenty of action indeed spread across the field as Darren decides to brake hard for the final chicane. Hits his marks relatively good, make sure the car doesn't bounce too much on exit, and then take the path of least resistance all the way to the checkered flag. You'll see drivers hug that inside wall to the start-finish line. He stops the clock at a 59.6, currently P22, pushes himself all the way up to P number 19 as the clock is about to hit zero here at the Suzuka International Racing Course. You can see the beautiful Ferris wheel in the background. That will be the backdrop for the start of today's race. Very much looking forward to how these drivers tackle turn number one. Of course, it's a very high-speed entry, and leading them into that very corner is Louis Nasha there for Urano Esports. Very competitive and absolutely blitzes the field tonight. Some half a second clear of David Greisner in the McLaren. Maxime Detilly kicks things off on the second row of the grid with Ross Rizzo for company there in the Lamborghini Huracan. Great to see some diversity there. Simon Nicholson in the Audi starts from 5th with Mario Vlasic, John DeMiller, and Salvatore Guzzari finishing off row number 4. Zixo Romero starts off in position number 9 ahead of Mitch McLeod, who kicks off in the top 10.
Just missing out on the top 10 was the Kiwi Cameron Dance. He's going to be joined by Thomas Hins on the 6th row of the grid. Tony Sulosalmi lines up alongside Michael Hornby, 13th and 14th, with Juan Girbao and Niels Baukage in 15th and 16th. Maverick Benson and Lucas Crambier at 17th and 18th, with Darren Tune and Paul Mansell rounding out your top 20.
Strapoli Frank will kick things off on row number 11 with Andy Pers alongside him. Fabio Iotti, of course, a long-time driver of this series. Great to see him back for the final round. Starts in 23rd. Tommy DeWild in 24th on a very competitive lap time for the Huracan that has been stouted just to struggle a little bit here. Matthew Keane in 25th. With Christian Alvarez in 26th, with Mayuni Kitagawa in 27th, not setting a lap time at all. So that is your 27 cars that will take to the grid here at Suzuka, and you can see all the drivers just beginning to file in on the back straight. It's a very short formation lap here, so not long to prepare the tyres, which I'm sure the drivers would want to do. So the track only 22 degrees, it's not the hottest track, so getting heat and pressure into these tyres may take a little longer than we're used to, Reese.
Indeed, especially with the advances iRacing has been making as of recent with their tyre model and the way the tyres deal with heat generation. So look out for drivers getting a little off kilter through the S's on the first lap as the safety car pulls away. The start is going to be very important. I would expect NASA to go pretty much as soon as they are out of the Casio triangle. Try and get the best run possible to the start-finish line, but wait for that entry into turn 1. The tyres are going to be cold, the brakes are going to be cold, there's going to be plenty of understeer. Fortunately, they have a good runoff area to catch them if they fall, but Suzuka, not the kindest of venues.
No, not at all. If you find yourself in the grass here at Suzuka, usually there's only one way you're going. That's all the way to the barriers located around this circuit. You can see there was just a little bit of tyre warming from Nasha there to try and get a little bit more heat. And look at that, foot already to the floor. The pace car's barely into the pits, and he has absolutely bolted. It's a long run into turn number 1. How do they go for week number 12 of the Virtual Racing School GT Sprint Series? It is a McLaren 1, 2, 3, but it's all on behind at the moment as the drivers try and file in. Of course, some side by side on entry into the corner. Looks like 1 in the 7. That is going to be Mario Vlasic dumped unceremoniously off into the barriers, unfortunately. That is a shame there, and oh, it's all kicked off again as well. Multiple cars involved. John DeMiller and Tony Salsani are one of those drivers involved as well. So sadly, Reese, we said maybe it'd be a tricky start. It's proved just that.
Certainly has, and Miller was the one who made contact with Mario Vlasic to turn him around there in turn 2. So drivers having a lot of trouble dealing with the heavy lap 1 traffic through that S's section, but it looks like most of the field is out of there now, and Nasha still leading the way coming up into the hairpin, riding on board with Simon Nicholson in the Audi. He's got 3 McLarens up ahead of him. David Griesner currently checking his mirrors, as that was a very good exit from Maxime Detilly. Detilly nailed the start, meanwhile, managed to get past Griesner into the first turn. Cameron Dance, meanwhile, already up into 6th place, having started 11th.
Yeah, a very good start there for a number of drivers who were able just to keep their nose clean in the opening laps, of course, avoiding all of the chaos that we saw. But for our leaders, it's all untroubled and it's setting sail as we would expect, of course. Like you say, great start for the Tilly. Gressner still very much in the hunt as well. Go on board with Thomas Hinz here into the famous 130-yard corner. Of course, Hinsey still in the BMW M8. He has seemed to really enjoy that. And look at the blinding sun there. Visibility, what visibility as he goes a little bit wide. It's going to go side by side almost with Zisco Romero. But Zisco thinks a lot better of it and decides to play patient in the opening phase of this race.
Yeah, not the smartest move to try and go for a banzai dive at the chicane this early on, as there's a Ferrari off there. That's Maverick Benson. Looks like he's overshot the chicane, or maybe made contact with another car as Hinsey pulls out of the draft of Salvatore Gattuso. Side by side into turn 1, and Hinsey is ahead of the turn-in point. A big opportunistic move from Cisco Romero there to get the move done, and that is 2 positions lost for Salvatore.
Yeah, what an opportunistic overtake from Romero there, but pulled it off cleanly, and unfortunately for Salvatore, it was backwards 2 spots in a single corner, so not ideal at all. Speaking of not ideal, Christian Alvarez is not facing the right way here at the exit of turn number 1, and we're seeing a lot of drivers do that already. We saw one driver do it in qualifying, and already seeing a few do it in the race as well. So turn 1, or the exit of turn 2, I better should say, is proving just a little bit tricky as we go back up to our race leaders. And it is Louis Nash just beginning to pull away a little bit and just put a bit of pressure on the field to stay with him, as Tilly becoming under a lot of threat at the moment from Grishna, and Nicholson and Rizzo not being dropped either. So we've got a bit of a 4-way scrap for second at the moment as they make their way into Spoon. And what we are expecting a little bit in this race is it being quite a difficult circuit to actually make a pass on. So what a lot of drivers are thinking of doing is actually just sitting behind in the draft just a little bit, fuel save, and try and jump in the pits.
Yes, indeed. Every milliliter of fuel saved out on track is a fraction of a second less you have to spend at a standstill in pit lane. The drivers are going to have to pit at some point in this race, but we're thinking that the only real passes are going to be made there in the pit cycle, unless there's a driver that's been put way down the order. Ross Rizzo almost seeing an opportunity there on Nicholson. Whoa! Yes,
amazing
indeed.
360! That was unbelievable from Cam Dance. He's going to get passed around the outside from Hinsey, but that is not going to matter in the slightest for Cameron Dant. Sorry to cut across you there, Reese, but that was incredible. Darren Tune, unfortunately unable to replicate it. We're going to go straight to a virtual racing school replay right here and see what happened to Cam Dance. I think he's going to run just a little bit wide, get his wheel over the curb, loop it around perfectly, point it in the right direction, and off you go, Reese.
I give that a 9.5. Fantastic execution there from Cameron Dance, as this is the onboard from Mitchell McLeod, who drove in P6 at the time. Big sun right in front of the drivers, and we'll see what kind of avoiding action Mitch took there. Had to go to the left a little bit early there, but I think he had faith that Cameron would be able to recover that.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of faith given from Mitch McLeod to Cam Dance, but it was not ill put. Cam Dance doing beautifully there, and he's only lost 1 position from that, as he did end up getting past Thomas Hinz. Sadly, more drivers falling off the road, but Cam Dance, great effort there to, well, not to spin, but to recover it in the best possible fashion. You can see Thomas Hinz touching right underneath there. The size difference between the M8 and the R8, very, very large there, as the BMW. Just for an interesting fact for everyone, the BMW is actually the longest GT3, even over the likes of the Mercedes AMG, so it's not a small car there, Reese.
Yeah, right. That is an interesting fact indeed. BMW, of course, going for size over everything to assure their dominance of future GT3 races. The M4, incidentally, is going to be making its real-life racing debut this year, and iRacing given early access to the car to put it into the sim, and a lot of drivers have been repping BMW in the intervening weeks. Cameron Dance has started to gap this pack now, trying to escape the clutches of Hinsey, but Thomas there going into the Casio triangle. He's got 3 Audis behind him, all of which will want that position. Romero, Girbau, and Gattuso. But it seems that a draft train starting to form between these guys. I don't know if there's going to be any moves made before the pit cycle comes round.
Yeah, we'll have to wait and see, but if there's going to be any passes, it may just come there from the driver of Jean Gibao at the moment, because you can see he was just looking a little up the inside of Zisco Romero, who has been passed once and twice at turn number 1 so far this race. And Gibao maybe thinking about making one more driver to make a pass there at some point in the race. Romero just struggling a little bit on the entry there through these, of course, winding sectors of Suzuka Raceway. So not the best few lines there, and that just, you can already visually see the gap that has happened between Romero and Hinzi as we go to another virtual racing school replay. And this is going to be Paul Mansell this time, maybe even Lucas Crumbar, who just turns it in for turn number 2 a little too fast, and the front tyres just not giving the grip he was expecting.
Yeah, that's the issue there with turn 1. You've got to be very precise with when you get on the brakes and turn in. Otherwise, you're going to lose grip at the front and there's no sign of it ever coming back. You're braking and turning at the same time coming into those first turns at Suzuka. But now Crambier is right in the midst of this magnificent pack we've got here. He's got Frank Stripoli, Andy Pears, Fabio Iotti, John Miller all chasing for this position. One of the closest battles on the circuit right now.
Yeah, it is indeed, and John Miller, of course, can see just a little bit of damage to the rear right quarter of his Audi, of course, with all the chaos that ensued in the opening corners. John started in 7th, has been sadly put down into 17th place as Salvatore Guzzo, who I believe was running very high up just a few laps ago. Watch the rejoin, that was always a little bit aggressive on the reverse. Thankfully, we'll get it all under control. So we will go for a virtual racing school replay to see how this has happened for Salvatore, who was been running just outside the top 10, but on a very good pace, and they're involved in this battle involving Cam Dance and Thomas Hinz as well, and the car just really got a little bit of oversteer on exit there, and it really never looks like it was going to come back to him.
Yeah, just waiting for the gap there between cars to get himself into a position to do a 3-point turn, get back on the circuit. Yeah, I have noticed there's quite... Oh no, Cameron Dance has spun at turn 1. I was just about to say, there's been issues here with lots of drivers having their cars snap on them in these fast corners.
Yeah, it has been happening a lot, and in particular with the Audis, of course, that's the second visit we've seen for Cam Dance facing the wrong way on the circuit. But not able to recover at this time as we go on board with Simon Nicholson in one of the Audis that is not going for a rotation at the moment, but maybe it will be a rotation of positions very soon. Ross Rizzo behind, looking very strong in the Lamborghini at the moment, and we haven't seen too many Lamborghinis at the front in these races over the last few weeks, but Ross Rizzo flying the flag nice and high at the moment, and really looking to pressure the number 2 car.
Indeed, ran a tenth faster than Nicholson on the last lap, so Ross Rizzo is definitely on the attack here. But Rizzo is known in many sim racing circles as a master fuel saver. He's got many fantastic results in both GT and V8 racing in the AusNZ community by working the pit strategy and just fuel saving when he needs to. Further back in the field, Fabio Iotti, right in the middle of this fight here. I think that is Cameron Dance just behind him, 15th and 16th, so Cameron has an awful lot of work to do here if he wants to get further up the field as Ross Rizzo goes through at 130R. That's a place to make a pass.
That is indeed a pass to make a play, a place to make a pass. But unreal, incredibly. You can tell I've just woke up halfway. But virtual racing school replay of this pass. This is going to be something pretty special, I'd have to imagine. These passes here don't happen all too often. In the draft there of Simon Nicholson, pull to the inside, and how is this going to go on corner entries? Nicholson's just going to throw the white flag. I think he is, because quite simply, the last place he would want to be at 130R is on the outside of another driver there. So absolutely phenomenal move from Ross Rizzo there. Moves himself up another place, and if he's going for a pass this early on and not deciding to fuel save, and like you say, we know Rizzo is a well-known fuel saver, is that just perhaps him saying maybe there's a bit more pace in that Trek Esports Lamborghini, and he wants to do hunting of these guys in Maxim Natili and David Krishna?
That is the question. We'll have to wait and see, but either way, Ross Rizzo is going to have some time here in clear air now, and he's going to be using a little bit more fuel than he might like. Griesner, on the other hand, he is sitting very nicely within the draft range of Maxime Detilly, so we can expect a shorter pit stop from him. And having a look at Rizzo and Nicholson here, it seems that Nicholson hasn't quite been able to fight back against Rizzo just yet. But we'll have to keep an eye on Mitchell McLeod too, who heads up this pack here with Thomas Hinz, Romero and Gibao behind him. McLeod's last lap was a 59.804, so seems that he is quite pacey, pretty much equal with Hinz and the BMW behind.
Yeah, I was actually just looking. These three cars in this little battle at the moment, well, including Mitch McLeod, Hinzi, and Romero, their last lap time was all within 300ths of a second. So if they did find each other on track, it would be a very evenly matched battle indeed, and that would be one to watch as the Audi of Romero closing in at 130R, nowhere near close enough to make a move. But you can see the speed difference there. The Audi has a big lift on entrance as well from Romero, so clearly quite a bit of fuel saving going on for him, and he wants to make a pass that way as he closes up back very, very much into the braking zone of the final chicane.
Indeed he does, and noticing that there is a bit of front left damage there for Thomas Hinz, so that probably explains why he can't go a bit faster than Mitchell McLeod at this point. We're going to grab a virtual racing school replay here of something else happening for Cameron Dance. I'm wondering what's happened here. Is it going to be another 360 at 130R? The Kiwi having a bit of a horror show here in this race, but just getting the wheels off the curb and round he goes. Wasn't quite able to do the artful 360 that he did, actually clouts the wall. But, well, I think Cameron Dance now just hoping to get to the finish.
Yeah, I think so. It's going to be a case of survival there for Cam Dance. Maybe a click too little wing on the back of that car as a few drivers decided to take pit stops, including Tommy Wild in the very colourful Lamborghini, and that unfortunately just misses his pit entry ever so slightly. But Cam Dance all the way down in 20th place now, so not ideal for him at all. But if he can just stay on the black stuff, keep the car facing the right way, we know there's plenty of pace in that Audi, so maybe he can salvage something out of this, even if it's just the top 15 on board, with Thomas Hinz at the moment running in position number 7, looking back to position number 8. Cisco Romero continues to apply the blowtorch onto the back of a very beautiful looking sim racing channel car as it works its way through Spoon Corner. And you can see the sun even in the background there, very much ploughing on to the Suzuka circuit at the moment. But this battle just staying very stagnant at the moment, and Jean Gibao just behind in position number 9, not quite able to stay with them in the same respect I may have thought. They were just dropping off a little bit over the last lap or two as the Audi again closes up very dramatically into 130R, using the straight line speed advantage very well, and just trying to see if there's maybe an opportunity to get past Thomas Hinz a little earlier, because I'd have to say Romero maybe looking the more quicker of the two at the moment and just being held up ever so slightly, so maybe it's not even worth fuel saving right now, and Romero may be better off going for a bit of a risky move and making progress that way.
Yeah, getting a little bit of extra time in that clear air, because, I mean, as we ride on board with Romero, we're going to get an idea of what it's like to go through this first sector here at Suzuka, the very fast turn 2, and you see Thomas Hinz just up ahead of him, eking out his line, and a slight correction there, you notice, from Cisco Romero. That curve coming into turn 3 can very easily unsettle the car, but you see that these corners are very, very long, and if you make one mistake on entry, you're distracted by the car in front of you, or you miss your turn-in point, then that is a ton of time lost, and you're going to be back in the clutches of the driver behind. They're both just avoiding the inside curb there at Degner as well. They don't want to get too greedy with that either.
No, not at all. If you clip that inside curb, you can be going for a very, very long ride into the gravel. We've seen that many times. Of course, I hate to mention Formula 1 so much, but I think back to Heikki Kovalainen in 2009 in the McLaren had a rather large accident there, all because he just clipped that inside curb ever so much. And these GT3 cars, of course, are a little bit more compliant over bumps compared to a Formula 1 car, but nonetheless, not something you want to be doing all too much as these GT3 cars get more and more aero-dependent over the years. They're carrying more and more speed into that entrance there, so a very fast corner indeed as they work their way out of Spoon once again. I'm surprised to see how clean drivers are taking it through Spoon. Of course, that's a corner that even you mentioned, Reese, is sometimes a little bit hard to get consistently, but the driver's definitely on top of it at the moment in this race as they work their way into 130R once again. Cisco Romero really strong on this second half of the circuit, but I'm just noticing he drops off quite a lot in the opening S's. So maybe that's even just a case of strengths and weaknesses of the car, because it's becoming quite a consistent trend where Thomas Hinz will pull away in this opening sector all the way through the S's into the Degners, and then from about the hairpin onwards to about Spoon, then into 130R, the Audi looks a lot stronger, but its straight line speed cannot be argued with. But it's a long way around the outside as the car in front just goes for a little bit wide at turn number 1, but no change of position here between Hinz and Romero, but clearly the threat is there, and Romero, there's an opportunity to make a pass. He's willing to go for it.
Yeah, indeed he is, and he would have been hoping that he could get that done and maybe get a gap on Thomas Hinz by the time he goes for the pits. There's Cameron Dance, who we've seen loop it a few times tonight, going in for his scheduled pit stop. But again, you know, it's a little bit different this time, I notice. There's, oh no, just behind them there, that was Gerbau going for a spin coming out of the S's. And that's something that also happened to Niels Balkaga in lap 2. Just catching the tyres on the outside of that long opening corner. And that's all she wrote in terms of spinning.
Yeah,
there we go.
Oh, that's a fast spin there. You can see nothing you can do to stop there. Of course, these cars... Oh, Thomas Hinz is off as well, I've just noticed as well. And so is Mitch McLeod going nice and slowly. So what has happened here? So something dramatic has happened. Hinz's car looks to even maybe be broken there. He's going to pull off the circuit. That is day done. And you also saw Mitch McLeod very far off the pace as well. And now ahead of nowhere, we have the driver of Jean Gerbau, who just went for a major spin, is actually ahead of both of them. So what is happening here? McLeod, spins it all by himself, clips Thomas Hinz by the smallest of margins, and throws them both off. So that is nothing but a highly unfortunate set of circumstances there that not really anyone could do anything about, as in the space of 4 or 5 corners, 4 cars involved in this little fight, all taken out of contention apart from the Audi behind. And Hinzy, he took evasive action, but evasive action wasn't enough.
Yeah, that's a real shame. I mean, you know, he did the sensible thing and tried to stick as far right as possible, but Mitchell McLeod, currently in that spin, he was a passenger and had no choice but to come back onto the circuit. Checking back in with P2 and P3, Maxime Detilly remains ahead of David Griesner as McLeod has come into the pits. He's joined by Maverick Benson. No better time to pit than just after you've had a spin. Try and lose as little time as possible. But question is, when are these guys going to try and come in? Detilly is going to have the disadvantage at the pit stop. He would have used a bit more fuel. So does Griesner try and get a leg up on him by trying to undercut him, come in a lap earlier?
Well, you definitely have to think he's going to try something to make a pass here, because he's got the pace. He knows that if he can just get even a nose ahead of Tilly there, he can make something happen, as plenty of drivers make their way out of the pits. I just want to give a quick mention as well to the drivers of Paul Mansell and Fabio Iotti. They both started quite far down the order in 20th and 21st. But they've both made an incredible amount of ground over the course of this race. You can see a massive amount of positions gained here for Paul Mansell, and started in 20th, currently up to 7th place. For Fabio Iotti, it's actually, sorry, he started in 23rd place, but is now up to 10th place. So a really good job from Fabio Iotti and Paul Mansell to make their way up some 13 spots on a track we thought may have been hard to make passes on.
Indeed, got to give a shout out to Lucas Crambier and Stripperly Frank as well. They started in 18th and 21st and running here behind Paul Mansell. We saw Crambier just have a ever so slight issue at turn 1 earlier on in the race, so it's been a good recovery from him so far. In the draft of Mansell's Ferrari, lifts off into 130R, keeps the fuel save going.
He does indeed, and speaking of fuel, Maxime Detilly has decided, nope, I'm not going to let myself get undercut. I'm going to undercut you, David Griesner. He dives in nice and early, so that is going to be interesting to see how that pans out, because Detilly is going to get the slight undercut, but you would expect Griesner with a slightly shorter pit stop due to the fuel save he's been able to do over the last 10 laps of this race. And of course for Detilly, the trouble with taking an early pit stop is sometimes you may just come out in a little bit of traffic. So I'm curious to see the rejoin here for Maxime Detilly. It's going to be relatively close with a number of cars, actually. I think he's going to be safe ahead of Matthew Keane. So Detilly will get a little bit of a clear track, but it's not so calm and collected. Maybe for a few drivers around Detilly who want to go in for an early stop as well. And Niels Bokash goes for a move up the inside of Miyuki Kitagawa there. And I'm not sure if he made that pass happen, but nonetheless, that is still a battle that is raging on as well in the lower half of this field. So great to see plenty of drivers having a scrap at the moment. So you head up to Strapoli Frank at the moment, who's chasing down Lucas Crombie. And this is a battle we haven't seen too often this season. It's Ferrari versus Audi. And at the moment, the Audi not looking all so comfortable, and the Ferrari maybe looking good here.
Indeed, the Audi has been a difficult car for a lot of people in the years it's been on the service. At first, it didn't like curbs, then it did like curbs, and now it's somewhere in between as far as I'm aware. So it definitely doesn't deal with bumps as well as the Ferrari does. So it will be interesting to see how that battle turns out. News on Thomas Hinz, meanwhile. You saw him stopped in the pits when we briefly checked in on Paul Mansell. It looks like Hinzy's out of the car and has retired from the race. Very unfortunate for the Australian. Mitchell McLeod, though, the other car involved in that incident, is continuing.
Yeah, big shame there for Thomas Hinz, of course, running inside the top 10, but just hasn't been his day, unfortunately. The cards weren't there to fall in his favour, and sadly it will be a retirement there. And Mitch McLeod, of course, who kicked that all off, is, like you say, still on track and looking relatively undamaged. So that is just the cruel nature sometimes of motorsports, where the driver that made a mistake gets away scot-free, but the driver that tried to avoid the mistake, unfortunately, pays the biggest price. Motorsport is a cruel mistress at times as we go to a virtual racing school replay. And what are we going to see here? What we're going to see is one of the most aggressive entries into 130R. And I was really hoping Jean Jabal would hold on to that, but it wasn't to be. And I don't blame him, because that is a very hard place to recover a car. As we're going to stay on the replay here and just get another shot of something else that has happened around the circuit. And this is the battle we were looking at earlier with Lucas Crombie and Strapoli Frank. Maybe something has happened here in towards turn number 1. Runs a little bit wide and catches the curb, flicks the car around. And that is shades of Cameron Dance, the second time that we saw Cam Dance go around. So those Audis not so comfortable when it comes to braking and turning in at the same time.
Certainly not. Jubao there in the pits. Yeah, the thing with Lucas Crombie was I noticed he turned in a bit early and clipped the curb on the inside of turn 1. Thomas Hinz back out on circuit as well, which is good to see. So I'll reverse my earlier call that he's retired. He's going to come back and try and get a finish and some championship points, maybe a little bit of extra safety rating. This is an official series after all. Crombie, meanwhile, having had that half spin at turn 1, is now back with Mario Vlasic, who was the first car to go for a spin at the very start of the race, turned by John Miller in turn 2. He's back up into 9th place, has yet to make his pit stop though.
Ross Rizzo, a very lucky driver to still be facing the right way. A big moment for him at Spoon, one of the first drivers we've seen struggle at Spoon all race long. And Simon Nicholson actually had to take avoiding action. We see a car off the road in the background there as well. But Virtual Racing School replay right about now. And what we're going to see here is a very interesting run, maybe for Fabio Iotti, who just clips the inside curb a little bit, and sadly the car just rotates very quickly and sadly hits the only bit of the tyre wall that is sticking out. So that is very unfortunate there, and we're going to try and get a shot of Ross Rizzo as well and see what happened for him at Spoon Corner a little bit earlier on in the lap. So it was a big moment mid-corner for Rizzo, and Simon Nicholson had to try and avoid it, and sadly lost quite a bit of time. So we'll see here, he just turns in at the back end, steps out, slams on the brakes, and Nicholson dives it all the way off the circuit with a much lower entry speed for Ross Rizzo. We'll go back on board here with Nicholson as well. And what you're going to see is Rizzo, he's going to turn into the corner and then suddenly put on the brakes as he's losing the car, and Nicholson has to quickly avoid any contact.
Yeah, and that's the point at Spoon where you're back on the throttle trying to maximize your entry for the second part of the corner. So Nicholson was really thrown off rhythm there. Fabio Iotti, we just saw have that off in the pits, and there goes Paul Mansell past Andy Pers into the first turn. Pers trying to come back at him on the exit of turn 2, but once someone's passed you there, you're not going to make the pass back in the S's.
No, not at all. You'd have to be very brave or have a massive speed differential to try anything on the S's. We've seen drivers try, but very few succeed. Back on to this little battle involving Lucas Crombie and Mario Vlasic, of course. These two both been in the wars at some point in this race. We saw Crombie a few laps ago go off at turn number 2. We saw Vlasic, I believe on lap number 1, turn number 2, go off the road as well. So they've both been off at the exact same corner, just on very different parts of the race. But they've both found each other on track now. And Vlasic, we know the pace is there because of course he qualified it up in position number 6. Lucas Krombeer qualified in position 18. So maybe a speed differential here between Vlasic and Krombeer as they work their way towards 130R. And he's looking as Mario Vlasic. There is no form of overlap there, so he will have to sit behind for at least the next few corners. But we've seen a lot of drivers make passes happen into turn number 1. That's really been the hot spot. Get a good exit out of this chicane, build that speed all the way out and onto the front straight and try and make something happen there. So we'll see what Vlasic can do in the draft behind the number 17 car. He's a little far back though, and I do wonder if maybe that rear wing damage we're seeing on the left-hand side is just compromising his straight line speed because he's got nothing to fight with at the moment.
Yeah, that Audi, very aerodynamically sensitive as today's GT3 cars are. And if you're carrying a little bit of damage on that rear wing, yeah, maybe you might get a little bit of extra straight line speed, but I think largely it's the flow of the air as a whole around the car that is affected by that. Doesn't seem to be hurting Mario too much in the S's, but just as I say that, he goes a little bit deep into the right-hander, has to bring it back in. These guys have got Maxime Detilly coming up behind them at a rate of knots. Remember, Detilly only pitted a couple of laps ago, and he is certainly on the attack. He ran a 59.5 on that last lap. These guys just in front of him did 2-minute .5s.
Yep, a big speed differential there between Detilly and these drivers in front of Vlasic and Krombeer. But the issue is for Detilly, getting held up in this traffic is hurting him quite a lot. He did a 59.5. The driver he's trying to undercut did a 58.9, some 0.6 of a second quicker. So, you know, it was a bold strategy for Detilly to try and react early to the likes of the drivers around him. But I do wonder if maybe it wasn't the best call and he's just going to get hurt a little bit too much in traffic. So we're going to get our answer very shortly as Louis Nasha and David Grishna both dive into the pits. Of course, the 12-minute mark are remaining left in this race, usually the hot spot for where we see drivers take pit stops. But apparently Ross Rizzo and Simon Nicholson didn't quite get that memo.
Yeah, looks like they are focused on their race with each other, and Cisco Romero avoiding the pits as well, trying to go for that late pit stop, try and get as much of an advantage as they can on speed alone. Maxime Detilly almost going for the move there on Mario Vlasic out of 130R. Louis Nasha is out of the pits, and oh no, Detilly turned around there at the chicane. That has completely destroyed the battle with David Grishna, who has just exited the pits now. That battle is well and truly over.
Yep, unfortunately a big mistake there for Detilly. I do believe the battle may have already been over just due to the amount of he was getting held up behind the other drivers in front. But if there was any chance, I think it's been absolutely blown there as David Grishna gets back out on track, and he's only just ahead of Mario Vlasic. So actually maybe it would have been a little closer than I thought, and maybe Detilly could have just stayed in the slipstream a little bit more. I'm looking at pit stop times, and Detilly was actually a second faster in the pit stops than Grishna. So, you know, Detilly, he went risky. It could have paid off, but sadly it went the other way. But there was definitely more potential there than I was giving him credit for. So a good strategy call, just wasn't meant to be this time around as Ross Rizzo continues trucking around in the Lamborghini at the moment, and he has managed to gap and break draft with Simon Nicholson behind. So that was definitely the right call early in the race for Rizzo to go for that aggressive lunge on Simon Nicholson, get that overtake done before they take their pit stops, and try and make some ground that way. It's clearly been the much safer option for Rizzo to get himself out of a battle and get himself some clean air as well. So Rizzo fires it into 130R, and you'd have to assume he'll be into the pits this time around. We haven't seen many GT3 cars go beyond the 30-minute mark in the race at any point this season, so clearly it's going to be very tight on fuel for Rizzo, and clearly a stretch too far to go one lap longer. Simon Nicholson agrees and will dive into the pits as well. So we'll see what these guys cycle in at the end of their pit stops, but you'd have to assume they'll be nice and safely in third and fourth place as Cisco Romero clips the grass on pit entry and clatters the inside Armco there. So lucky to get away with that, but maybe, just maybe, a little bit of steering damage for the Audi there, because that was a hit into the Armco at a pretty bad angle race.
Yeah, certainly was. We're on board with him then coming out of 130R and be able to get a view here. It's a very difficult pit entry here at Suzuka. Really tightens up as you come out of the last corner, and you'll see the grass up on the right just sends the car sideways, and bam, big right front damage there for Cisco Romero, and he'll be sitting in the pits for a couple of seconds to get some of that damage repaired. Mario Vlasic, meanwhile, has made his way into pit lane. Romero is out of the car. That's a retirement for him. Matthew Keane, Niels Balkaga, and the driver of Darren Tune also into the pits now. So it looks like the entire field has cycled.
Absolutely, as the famous saying here at SimSpeed goes, the field has been cleansed. Mario Vlasic will rejoin the circuit, and just behind Andy Pers there, so a fairly close rejoin. But Vlasic will try and make some positions up late in this race. Of course, qualified in 6th, currently finds himself sitting in position number 10, so plenty more to come. Salvatore Guzzo, of course, we saw him have a spin. I believe it was a spoon a little bit earlier in the race, trying to make a bit of a comeback in his first target. Manyuki Kitagawa there into turn 1 and 2. Not close enough to make anything happen, but a big speed differential between these two. Just on the last lap, there was 0.3 of a second in the favor of Guzzo. So the Audi clearly working a little better than the Ferrari in this situation, at least.
Yeah, and both of these guys had just come out of the pits. They pitted together on the last lap as well. Have a look at the pace there from Gattuso. Certainly feeling very confident with his Audi's capabilities, but he's going to have to wait until a more open section of the circuit to try and make the move here on Kitagawa. Coming into the double Degna complex, two of the most difficult corners on the circuit. There was a slight slide from Kitagawa there on the exit, which I think is certainly going to play into Gattuso's favor. Look at how aggressive he is on the brakes in that Audi, turning it in early. He's very confident in those tires.
Absolutely, he knows there's not much time left in the race, so he's going to use every bit of them because they're not needed for much longer at all. And Salvatore actually on the in-game voice chat as well, just saying g'day to Manyuki ahead and seeing if there's any way he can get an easy pass, but I don't think Manyuki is in any mood to give any gifts here at Spoon and any time other in the circuit as well. I think this is going to be a hard-fought battle all the way to the final minutes of this race. Of course, 4 laps remaining for some of our drivers, it does appear to be, so not long at all. So if you're going to make a pass happen, you've got to make it pretty sharpish because time is definitely running out as the rest of the drivers work their way through. So it is Ross Rizzo on the podium as we expected. So he has actually managed to jump Maxim Matilli there. Sorry, I've just missed the pass as well. A big pass there for Guzzo, who will move up 1 extra spot. Back up to Andy Pers and Mario Vlasic. They will continue their scrap. But that spin for Maxim Matilli, we saw that happen live and we thought, that's going to cost him 2nd place for sure. But what it's actually done, it's actually put Maxim Matilli completely off the podium altogether. So Ross Rizzo now in 3rd place, 1 second ahead of Simon Nicholson, who was applying quite a bit of pressure. He's taken 8 tenths of a second out in the last lap has Simon Nicholson, so he's got plenty of pace. And Maxim Matilli was the fastest of a lot of them, so maybe, just maybe, if this can get a little bit spicier, we could have a very good battle for the podium to end this race.
Certainly hoping so, as we're going to go to another virtual racing school replay here. Something has happened out on the circuit. Cameron Dance. Here we go. Whoa! Hello! Goodness me. That was Thomas Hinds, I think, stopped, and oh no, that was contact from behind there for Cameron Dance. A very odd spin.
It was indeed, and Thomas Hinds will go and try and make a pass happen there, so Hindsy was off the road there as well. But, I mean, it's hard to find the bright side for Cam Dance if you are, of course, that's your 4th rotation of the race. But, I mean, if there's any bright side, at least it wasn't him doing it solo this time. That's about all I've got for Cam Dance. It's been a very tricky race indeed. He currently finds himself quite some way down the order in 18th when he started in position number 11, side by side into 130R. How do you like this from Mario Vlasic as Cameron Dance goes for a 5th spin now? He cannot stop spinning in that Audi. But Vlasic, very brave at the moment, looking about maybe up the inside. And look at the checkup between this around the outside for Crombie. Opportunistic to the max, but pays off brilliantly.
Nice.
I've got to wonder what was happening into that final chicane there. That was a very odd stack up for a number of drivers, including Mario Vlasic. That was very slow on entry. And Lucas Crombie just arrives on the scene and says, well, if you're going to go that slow, I'll just take the outside.
Yeah, for sure. It looked to me like Andy Pers lifted off early into Casio Triangle. Of course, he had one of the shorter pit stops in the field at only 8.8 seconds, and Vlasic reacted to that. went slower as well. So Crombie on the racing line decided, I've got all the grip, I've got all the speed, I'm going to go for that. So yeah, he is now ahead of Lasich, though not without a little bit of contact. Here's Matthew Keane and Maverick Benson. Another Audi versus Ferrari battle.
Yep, indeed. Of course, looking at 3 laps to go. So Benson has a lot of work to do if he's going to make this pass happen. His time is running out. 4/10 quicker last lap, so the speed advantage is absolutely there in the Ferrari. Just needs to find somewhere to do it. Of course, Kamui Kobayashi was very famous for making huge lunges into the hairpin. If it's the last lap, maybe Maverick Benson will think about that. How about lap 18? That is a perfect move up the inside. Plenty of room given from Matthew Keane, not willing to get pushed off the road at all there. Gives all the space needed. Maverick Benson actually ends up pulling the Kamui Kobayashi 3 laps earlier than I expected.
Indeed he does. That was a great move there, but I think Matthew Keane might be backing off. I'm looking at the pit stop times, and Keane has the shortest pit stop of everybody at just 7.5 seconds. So either he's really, really good on fuel, or he's taken a little bit less than he anticipated. As here we go, Balkage trying to make up a position here at 130R. Will Matthew Keane lift off and let him go? No, it's going to be Balkage who does the lifting off. Only a couple of laps to go, though, so he's going to have to make that move quick, sharp.
Yep, absolutely. But with the speed advantage we're now seeing, I don't think there'll be too much trouble, especially the McLaren, which is well known for its straight line grunt. What can it do down the front straight? Of course, the driver of Matthew Keane is going to get a draft effect from the Ferrari in front, but that McLaren, it's got plenty of horsepower. It can close in, and you can see it's beginning to close in, but it's not quite going to get there in time as flames fire out the back of the MP412C. A little bit wide at turn number 1 for Matthew Keane, so he's still playing pretty risky. He's not fuel saving a massive amount, so either he thinks, hey, I'm absolutely fine on fuel, no issues here at all, or maybe, just maybe, he's thought, look, I'm too far gone at this point, let's just go fast and take the pit stop afterwards. Runs a little bit wide, S's as well. But yeah, no, absolutely right. His pit stop was a massive amount shorter than anybody else on track, to the form of almost 2.5 seconds, which is near enough an entire lap and a half of fuel. So hopefully he's calculated the right amount of laps in this race, and the race won't go a lap longer than he anticipated, as Borkagi there getting very close. Is he going to try a Kamui Kobayashi at the hairpin? You can see positions to the left side, up the inside, and this is becoming deja vu for Matthew Keane. He has plenty of room. He's not putting up any fight at all there.
Certainly not, as that is going to be white flag for Louis Nasser coming into turn 1 and 2. He crossed the line with 1 minute and 58 seconds on the clock, which is roughly what drivers are doing up the top there in terms of race pace. So if he backs off a little bit, it'll be 1 to go. But if he decides to go hell for leather, it's going to be 2 laps to go, and then everyone's going to be in trouble. Paul Mansell and Stripperly Frank there still battling for 7th and 8th position. And it's Ferrari versus Ferrari here for the minor positions in the top 10. Mansell has done a fantastic job, as has Frank, of making their way up through this field. Doesn't look like there's going to be a shade of a move there, and they're still not 100% on whether or not this is going to be the final lap for them. Doesn't seem like there's going to be much of a change between those guys, but Nasser out of the hairpin now. He has just got Spoon, the straights, and 130R and the chicane to go, and he will have taken a very commanding victory here tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. He's never looked trouble, has he? He's managed to get pole position. He broke away fairly early. About lap 3, he broke slipstream. And from there, it was no looking back. Just eyes forward and run for the hills there. Very dominant in the McLaren, and it has been a 1-2 for the McLaren, but they're not going to lock out the podium like we expected, as the white flag is getting ready to be thrown at the start-finish line. Turns it in very fast at 130R, and then hard on the brakes into the final chicane for the very last time. The clock goes to 7 seconds, goes to 6, goes to finishing. It's going to be the checkered flag in week number 12 of the Virtual Racing School GT Sprint Series for Louis Nasher for Urano Esports. Absolutely dominant, never looked troubled, and he will cross the finish line first. And some 10 seconds back, we find David Grishner, a very strong pace all race long. He held off the charge from Maxim Matilli and strategized his way to second place, as does Ross Rizzo, who gets a very surprising podium. Of course, we didn't expect that after seeing the pace of the McLarens early on, but he did a beautiful job at the end of it all. Andy Pers getting very defensive now. He's going to have to get defensive against the driver of Lucas Crumby. And see a very defensive line in towards 130R. It's going to compromise his exit, but I think maybe, just maybe, he has the margin to hold off the BMW into the final chicane. Lucas Crumby tried it anyway, but not close enough. He's going to have to sit behind and accept position number 10 in this one. Mario Vlasic will sit in position number 11, as well as the rest of our battles all look to just trickle down into the final few chicanes. Michael Hornby and Darren Chu relatively close, but not close enough into the final chicane is Matthew Keane. It was a very short pit stop. We knew it was going to be tough, and sadly, Reese, a little bit too tough.
Yes, indeed. Running out of fuel there on the final lap, and I don't even know if he's going to make it to the finish. Christian Alvarez is going to come through to finish in 19th. Mitchell McLeod as well going to round out the top 20 here tonight. It's a race of what could have beens all throughout the field, and Mitchell McLeod, one of those could have beens. Interesting note just before we go through the results, I'd like to highlight the drivers that finished in 7th, 8th, and 9th started 20th, 21st, and 22nd. How's that for a run up the field?
Yep, what do we know, Reese? We said you can't pass here. We were absolutely proven wrong there. Great effort there from all of them, all moving up exactly 13 spots. Louis Nasha didn't have the opportunity to move up 13 spots. He started on pole, and he would finish there 10 seconds clear of the field. David Grishner in second place ahead of Ross Rizzo in the Huracan in position number 3. Simon Nicholson rounds it off in position number 4 ahead of Maxim Matilli, who would be wondering what could have been after a very difficult race there, after a spin at the end of the pit stop phase. John Miller in position number 6 ahead of Paul Mansell, Strapoli Frank, and Andy Pers. Great effort there from all of them. And position number 10 goes to Lucas Cromby.
Just making it there to the finish. Mario Vlasic started in 6th place, but unfortunately has to settle for 11th, carrying that damage to the end. Maverick Benson made up 5 positions to finish in 12th place, and Niels Balkage recovering to 13th. Michael Hornby finishes where he started there in 14th place, with Darren Tune running out the top 15. Salvatore Gottuso, another driver that started in the top 10, but unfortunately with a couple of spins along the way, has to settle for 16th. Cameron Dance, spinning way more than anyone in this race, still manages to come home in 17th ahead of Fabio Iotti, Tommy DeVilda, and Minayuki Kitagawa.
21st place goes to Christian Alvarez there in the BMW. And Mitch McLeod will be our last driver scored on the lead laps. Matthew Keane does get classified 1 lap down at the end of it all. Thomas Hinz in 24th. What could have been for him running comfortably inside the top 10? Sadly, just things weren't going his way today. Cisco Romero, of course, involved in an incident on pit entry as well. A shame to see that happen. John Jabau had a tricky race, of course, going off at Dunlop, and Tony Sulslami barely made it through the first lap. All kinds of chaos there, as this race was definitely one of survival, Reese.
That it was, and a lot of drivers falling victim to the foibles of Suzuka International Racing Course, but still, I think that was a pretty entertaining night of racing. I always like a good GT3 battle, and we saw quite a few of those today.
Absolutely we did. Well, that just about concludes our season of the Virtual Racing School GT Sprint Series, and what a season it has been. We have just about seen it all over the last 12 weeks, but for the drivers, there'll only be a single week of rest before the drivers head back out on track for another season of door-to-door racing. Of course, a massive thank you must go out to Virtual Racing School for both their support of the series and our broadcasts here on SimSpeed TV. As well, I must extend a thank you to Simon Mazzomo, Cameron Dance, and Reese Gardner for joining me this season for the coverage, as well to our director Jay Kennedy for his work behind the scenes. But for now, I'm Bo Albert, and we'll see you next time here on SimSpeed TV. Fantastic. This is GT racing right now.
He's got traction. He's got rid of the outside of both of them. Maloney. Oh, he's taken Anderson. Anderson's up to him. Oh, my God. Oh, big crash. Oh, my goodness. Half the field's going to get rolled.
Second's very close. These guys, I want to make their way through the field very quickly. Oh, there we This is it. This is over. I can't believe this. Oh my God.
God, what?